The strange part wasn't that he lied to me. It was that the lie somehow made me understand him better. But I didn't realize that until much later. At the time, I just thought something felt off. I used to volunteer on Wednesday evenings at a small community center a few blocks from my apartment. Nothing dramatic, just a quiet building with a faded sign and a parking lot that was almost always half empty. Inside, a few rooms were used for tutoring, job assistance, and basic community programs. I helped with the job search group, mostly people trying to get back on their feet. The sessions were simple. We'd sit around folding tables with old laptops, help people write resumes, practice interviews, and talk through job applications. It wasn't complicated work, but it mattered to people. That's where I met Daniel. He showed up one rainy Wednesday in late October, mid-40s maybe, worn jacket, baseball cap pulled low. The kind of person you might pass on the street without noticing twice. He sat near the end of the table and didn't say much during introductions. When it was his turn, he just said, "I'm looking for work again." That was it. No story, no explanation, which wasn't unusual. A lot of people kept things brief at first, but something about the way he said it stayed in my head. Not nervous, not embarrassed, just careful. Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept coming back. He was polite, quiet, and surprisingly organized. His resume already looked decent compared to most people who came through the program. A few warehouse jobs, some delivery work, a short stretch in construction. Normal stuff. But every time we tried to dig a little deeper, talking about past employers or references, he kept the answers short. Company closed. Contract ended. Moved on. Technically answers, but not really explanations. At first, I assumed he was just private. A lot of people were. Still, I remember thinking one evening while reviewing his resume, something about the timeline didn't quite add up. Nothing obvious, just small gaps that seemed oddly placed. One night after the session ended, I stayed behind to finish cleaning up the room. Daniel was still there, slowly packing up his papers. I walked over and asked, "How's the job search going outside of here?" He shrugged. "A few applications, nothing yet." Then he looked at the floor for a moment and added quietly, "It takes time." Something about the way he said that made me pause. Not frustrated, not discouraged, almost like he already expected the process to be slow. A few weeks later, we had a mock interview exercise. I paired up with Daniel. We ran through the usual questions. "Tell me about your previous work experience." He answered clearly, calmly, no hesitation. "Why did you leave your last position?" That's when he paused. Not long, maybe 2 seconds. Then he said, "The company downsized." I wrote it down automatically, but inside I remember thinking, that answer sounded rehearsed. Not fake exactly, just practiced, like he'd said it many times before. After the exercise, I gave him some feedback. I told him, "Your answers are good, but employers usually want a little more detail about transitions." He nodded slowly. "I know." Then he said something I didn't expect. "Sometimes detail makes things harder." He said it casually, like it was obvious, but it stuck with me. A few days later, I was reviewing some files at the center's front desk. The director, Maria, walked by and noticed Daniel's name on the paperwork. She stopped for a moment. "You're working with him?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Seems like a solid guy." She nodded. "Just be patient with him." The way she said it made me look up. "Why?" Maria hesitated. Then she just said, "People come here with different stories," and walked away. That conversation stayed in my head longer than I expected, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't say. The turning point came about a month later. Daniel had finally landed an interview at a small logistics company across town. We spent nearly an hour preparing. Typical questions, body language, talking through his experience. At one point I asked, "Is there anything in your background an employer might ask about?" He looked at me carefully. Then he said, "Probably."
I waited, but he didn't continue. The interview happened on a Tuesday morning. Wednesday evening, he showed up to the center again. Same jacket, same quiet walk through the door. I asked him how it went. He gave a small smile. I think it was okay, but something in his voice felt distant. Near the end of the session, he asked if we could talk privately. We stepped into the hallway. For a few seconds, he just leaned against a wall, thinking. Then he said, "I told them about my record." I blinked. "Your record?" He nodded. "Prison." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Not because I was shocked exactly, just because it suddenly explained everything. The careful answers, the gaps in the resume, the rehearsed responses. "I did 8 years," he continued calmly. "Nonviolent charge, bad decisions when I was younger." He said it in the same steady tone he used for everything else. No excuses, no dramatic story, just facts. I finally asked, "Did they react badly?" He shook his head slightly. Hard to tell. Then he gave a small shrug. "But they deserve the truth." That sentence caught me off guard, because technically he hadn't been telling the whole truth before. A few days later, I asked Maria about it. She nodded slowly. "He told us when he first signed up," she said. "Why didn't you mention it?" I asked. Maria smiled gently. "Because it wasn't the most important thing about him." That answer sat with me longer than I expected. Over the next few weeks, Daniel kept coming to the sessions. Same routine, same quiet focus. And slowly, something shifted in how I saw him. Before, I'd been trying to help someone find work. Now I realized I'd been watching someone rebuild a life. Those are two very different things. One evening, we were finishing paperwork again when I asked him something that had been on my mind. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" He looked up from the table. Not defensive, just thoughtful. Then he said something I still think about sometimes. "Because people hear the ending before they hear the person." I didn't respond right away, because I realized he wasn't wrong. A month later, he got the job. Warehouse supervisor trainee. Nothing fancy, but steady work. When he came to tell us, he didn't celebrate much, just smiled quietly and said, "Looks like I'll be busy again." That night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the empty classroom for a while. I kept thinking about that first day he walked in. How quickly my mind had started building assumptions. Quiet guy, short answers, gaps in his resume. My brain had already been trying to fill in the blanks. And the truth was, I wasn't trying to judge him. I was still trying to categorize him, understand him, explain him. The truth was simpler. Daniel hadn't been lying to manipulate anyone. He had just been protecting the order in which people learned his story. Because once certain words enter a conversation, they change everything, even if they shouldn't. Looking back, I realized something else too. He hadn't actually hidden the truth. He just waited until the moment when it could be understood. And maybe that's what honesty sometimes looks like in real life. Not saying everything immediately, but saying the right thing when the right moment arrives. And now, whenever I meet someone new, I try to remember that. Every person I talk to is carrying a story I probably don't know yet. Gaps in timelines, careful answers, pieces they choose to share later. And maybe that's not dishonesty. Maybe it's just human behavior. Because sometimes the truth isn't about what someone says. Sometimes it's about when they feel safe enough to say it. And I still wonder how many people I've misunderstood simply because I heard their story in the wrong order.